fight. Starting to work on them a little bit. Hope you flop out of my hand. Working on them. Need to find the big ones though. Right now I'm trying to target the docks on the edge of these creeks, like little cuts, where the fish are kind of pulling out to their summertime habitat and the things they're going to do in the summer. So staying like 14 foot, flipping really 8 to 9 foot is really what I'm flipping. But right now they're just holding on the wind-blown dock. I guess waiting on an easy meal to come floating through. Ate it as soon as it hit the water. It wouldn't need a spinnerbait. Getting better, aren't they? This lake's got more docks than any lake, I feel like. Unless you get like Norman or something, but. And just the quality of fish. Something special about this place. You see that shad he just spit up? Look at that in the water. I mean, he had just ate that shad. See, that shad bled all in his mouth. He spit it up. He had just ate that shad. Yeah. Fish are on the move. They move so much during this time of year. They're going from their shallow back of the pockets, back of the creeks, moving out offshore to set up for their summertime patterns. And you fishing summertime fish is always just fun because most of the time you find a big group or big school and you can really fire them up if you find what they're keyed in on. And most of the time they're going to be keyed in on shad. Shad are going to come by these offshore humps and points, and fish are just going to kind of sit there and wait for them to float by, and then they're going to ambush them. But if that occasional crawdad comes by, rolls out from underneath the rock, or you know, underneath a tree limb that's under the ground or under the water, they're going to eat that crawdad too. So summertime fishing is very versatile. You know, never rule out the shallow water. When I say shallow water, I'm talking like 8-10 foot docks. Docks are always going to hold fish. You just kind of have to find that sweet spot and that happy median. Sometimes you can go to those shallower 8 to 10 foot docks and catch your, you know, limit fish and then pull offshore and catch your bigger fish, or vice versa. There's been times where I've pulled offshore and caught 20, 14-inch fish and never been able to catch that 3.5 pound fish. You know, that helps kick your bag up to that 12, 13 pound mark, but you know, it can happen. You can do it on the bank, you can do it offshore. It just depends on where the bigger fish are more active at. You just got to find that happy median in the summertime. But in the summertime, it's great to, you know, start your morning out with the top water in the low light conditions. That's the most fun bite you'll ever, you know, have fishing. It's getting pretty hot right now. When the top water bite gets fired up here on High Rock, I love throwing a popar. This one right here is a Rico popar, white bone color. It just kind of, to me, it looks like a, you know, matches our shad better. I throw it on a pretty, you know, light action rod. That's a light popar with a, you know, a reel I can really get that bait out there with. I just throw it out. Popar is pretty cool because you can pop them. When you're throwing the popar, you can, you know, you can pop it. It'll make that chugging, that plop sound that everybody is pretty familiar with. Some popars you can walk. The Rico you can walk a little bit. Sometimes that little bit of walking motion really gets those fish keyed in and fired up. Just kind of looks like a dying shad flirting or kind of jetting across the top of the water, and sometimes the fish can't resist that. But that's my summertime first thing in the morning go-to is my top water. I'll pick it up and I'll go to these banks and I'll start fishing. You know, right after these fish are getting off the beds, you're gonna have a shad spawn. Shad spawn's been odd this year because we've had some really hot days and it drops to some really cold days. I have not seen the shad spawn like I usually do, but that like this time of year, it's known for, you know, bass are off beds, water temperatures hitting that high 70s. It's going to be a good shad spawn. If you can find a shad spawn area don't rule out a top water of any sort. You can throw a buzz bait, poplar, walking bait, whatever you're more comfortable with. But for me, it's the poplar. That is definitely my go-to first thing in the morning summertime bait. So in the summertime, Texas rig is a very versatile bait. It can be used shallow and deep. Just depends on what type of weight you have on there. A lot of times I'll flip that 1/2 ounce weight, offshore. Then I'll get lighter when I go to the bank. But today it's a little bit of a cold front coming through. The fish are kind of hugging. They're more toward the bank. The offshore bite really hasn't come in yet. But I was throwing the Zoom Z-Crawl Texas rig. I had it pegged. It's on a 4/0 flipping hook, or EWG hook, and I was just kind of dragging around these piers real slow, and it was a great way to catch them today. But when the fish do get offshore, and you want to drag on some offshore rock, brush piles, or humps, points, etc., you can pick up a Texas rig and change your weight. And I usually don't peg it. I let that weight free float up the line, and I put like a curly tail worm on the back of it, a Zoom mag worm, anything that you're comfortable with, or I'll take and put a creature style bait on the back. Just depends on what I feel like the fish are keyed in on, what they're biting better. But Texas rig is definitely something that you probably want to have in your arsenal come summertime or anytime, because it's just very versatile. It's easy to use. You throw it out, you drag it, you can hop it, just make your own twist to it. But that's definitely a key bait for me in the summer. I put a bobber stop on my Texas rig when I'm flipping docks and I'm up shallow around the banks. It just kind of keeps the bait hugging the bottom a little bit more. I put on an EWG wide gap hook. This is a creature style bait, the Zoom Z-Crawl. That's what I'll flip piers and stuff with. But when the summertime heat warms up and I want to get offshore, I'll take the same setup and I'll just add a bigger weight to it. Put a curly tail worm on it, or like a larger creature bait, and I'll throw it offshore and I'll drag it. It comes through brush piles, rock piles, and anything like offshore structure you find, it comes through very, very well. And it's a good bait to get bit on consistently. Yeah. We caught quite a few on this one today, flipping around the piers. The fish really ate it well. They didn't really play around with it when they bit it. When they got a hold of it, they got a hold of it, and they grabbed it and swam off. There's a better old tub there. When the fish get off, they get offshore and they're not wanting to bite, finesse baits, slow moving baits. The biggest thing on high rock for me is cranking. Cranking's a great tool to have on high rock and to know how to do. This is a DT series crankbait from Rapala. I throw it on 12-pound copolymer line. And with a few modifications, you can really get these baits tuned in to the depth the fish are. I'm a big fan of the color, but when you take these baits and you go offshore and you're fishing these humps, these points, anything that you find offshore, you want to crank these baits down and keep contact with the bottom. You want the thing hitting the high spots in the bottom, just hit. You want to feel it ticking. If you're not feeling the bottom, you might want to go to a deeper diving crankbait. This right here is a DT10. I tied it on today because I felt like the fish in this kind of small cold front that we have would be pulled up a little bit more. So I knew if I were to fish offshore points, I would be targeting that 10-foot range. So I went with a 10-foot DT series crankbait, and I throw it on a 5 1-to-1 Lew's cranking reel. That keeps that bait in that strike zone a little bit longer, and just obviously a crankbait medium heavy 7/6 rod. It helps me load up on those fish, and it helps me keep that bait down, diving in that strike zone a lot longer. So sticking back out to that offshore pattern that you're going to have during the summertime, one of the best baits in my opinion is just the tried and true Carolina rig. I throw my Carolina rigs a lot with brush hawks. I do mix it up. I go with like curly tail worms. I will throw flukes if fish are heavily feeding on shad. But this is a bait that it's kind of doesn't take much skill to use. You throw it out across these structure points, flats, whatever, and you just drag it. That's all you do. You just throw it out and you just drag it back to the boat. And it's a bait that you definitely know when you get a bite, because they'll thump it or they'll swim with it. You'll feel them. It's a great bait to use offshore. So my Carolina rig setups are pretty simple. I take a 3/4 ounce egg weight. I put beads in there to make noise, like clacking noises when that weight's coming, you know, across the bottom, and it's ticking those beads. Kind of gets the attention of a fish. And then you just got a 2-way swivel. And then I tie a little bit longer leader than most people do, but my leader is connected to a 4/0 EWG worm hook, and I usually throw a creature bait when I'm throwing a Carolina rig. Zoom brush hog is my go-to. You can always mix it up and throw a curly tail worm. You can throw, you know, fluke style baits if the fish are really keyed in on shad. But this bait right here is very easy to use offshore and is guaranteed to get you bites. Anytime these fish move to their summertime offshore patterns, you want a decently stout rod when you're throwing a Carolina rig. This right here is a heavy action rod. It's a 7/4. I've got it paired up with a Shimano Corrado 8-to-1. It's a faster gear ratio reel. So when I get that bite, I can reel down and set the hook, because you're going to be setting the hook on some long casts, because with a Carolina rig, you're going to make really long casts and just drag it back to the boat and cover as much ground as possible. And it's a good slow way to slow yourself down and catch a lot of fish offshore in the summertime. But you know, there's a lot of other baits you can throw in the summertime to get bit. You can never rule out a weightless Senko around the piers or a shaky head or anything like that. But for me, anytime I hit the water this summer, those 4 broads are going to be on my deck, rigged that exact way, and hopefully that can help you guys out to catch more fish. During the shad spawns, don't rule out a spinnerbait. You can throw these spinnerbaits around the banks when the shad are up there flickering and really catch them. Or kind of like we did today, we caught some fish on spinnerbaits today. Yeah, I don't know if you can see, we had to pull off in a pocket. It's so windy, but the wind's just a whipping, and anytime that wind's whipping, I'm gonna have a spinnerbait, you know, tied on my deck just for having my back pocket. Some days they really key into that. I always throw a white spinnerbait. There's a lot of guys that are controversial with me about, well, I throw white and chartreuse, or I throw sexy shad. I just throw straight up white. Always have. It's always worked really great for me. When I'm throwing a spinnerbait, I want it to look like a little bit like bait ball. You know, I want it to imitate shad, bait ball, whatever. And down here on the Yakin chain, a gold blade has always been my best friend when it comes to a spinnerbait. Don't matter if it's wintertime or, you know, coming into summer. Gold blade is just like a little trick for me. But when you're coming into summertime, you know, throw a willow leaf. Willow leaf spinnerbait blades are great. They come through the water. You can kind of have a quick retrieve, which is different than your wintertime fishings when you want to have Colorado blades on for more vibration. I always switch to my willow leaves this time of year, and usually can catch a couple key fish on them when it comes into play. I throw these on, you know, Denali spinnerbait rods. This one's a medium heavy 7.2. I throw it on a monofilament line because I kind of like my spinnerbaits to slow sink. That's just a Shimano SLX DC reel 7.2. It's a moderately fast gear ratio, so I can control how fast or how slow the bait comes back to the boat. That's just a good middle of the road gear ratio for me on some of my moving baits. Spring and summertime fishing are kind of a beast of their own. You can just fish so many different ways and find fish in so many different patterns. You know, if you go back to your colder months, a lot of guys are going to be throwing square bills against the bank. That's the thing that catches a lot of fish, that spinnerbaits and things like that. But when the summertime fishing comes, you know, you can't rule out the docks and you can't rule out offshore. It's kind of like you got to find your happy median of, you know, which fish are more aggressive, how many more fish are biting in which area, and for me, fishing tournaments, I got to figure out where's the better quality fish.